You're listening to the Low Pressure Podcast, the podcast for skiers.
Presented by CMH Heli Skiing and Peak Performance.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sitting in your place here. So I've been here, I told you a couple times to this area, but it was I worked for the Four Seasons, living in a life of luxury, a couple days of skiing, but I never really got to see the town too much. No. Spent a bit of time at the VC. Rest in peace, the VC.
Oh, God. We miss that place.
Right. And then there was a bar. I don't know what it was called. It was down at somewhere in between the village and town. Like I think it was off to the side, and
probably the Calico.
Maybe we saw like a bluegrass band there one day or something.
Yep, the Calico or the Q.
Maybe it was the Q.
Or it wasn't the Stagecoach.
No, it wasn't Stagecoach. We went to the Stagecoach last night.
Yeah, it was halfway. Yeah, you did. Yeah, that was probably at the Q. They were doing live music for a hot minute there.
Yeah, and it was like kind of a separate room, and then like a center bar or something like that.
Yep.
And then I hadn't been back since, and it's been cool to be. I've been here for like another day, and it seems like I've already been at the airport twice. I dropped Amy off earlier today. I dropped Todd Laguerre off this afternoon.
Yeah.
And we met Griff for lunch. Was at the Stagecoach. Drove over to Victor. I'm like, I feel like I've been here forever, man.
You're getting the lap for sure.
It's like it's got a full on like Whistler Pemby vibe for sure. You got the hustle and bustle, and then you got the quiet little like rural town.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said you've been out here for a while?
I moved here in 1991. My brother Steve had moved here in 90. He actually moved to Telluride to take a year off from college, and halfway through the winter, it was we're from the East Coast, and halfway through the winter, he was skiing moguls, and they had a bad snow year in Telluride, which happens from time to time. And he's like, shit, man, I got, this 1 year off from college. And he had a buddy up in Jackson who was living in his parents' condo. And he's like, I can get you a job on the mountain, slinging drinks at the Casper restaurant. And you can stay in the condo and you'll get a ski pass with it. And it's absolutely firing out here. And so he up and moved to Jackson that midwinter. I visited him for spring break and rode the tram up. He took me over to Corbett's Couloir with this gal, Catherine, and he's like, Catherine, take Todd around. Showed me Corbett's, and he dropped in, and Catherine's like, let's go around. I was like, no, I'm dropping in. Dropped in, completely yard sailed. And, I've since developed a long relationship with Corbett's, but I left that spring break trip. I was a sophomore in college, and I went home and called my parents, and I said, I'm going to take a year off from college. And that was 30 years ago.
Then they call up Steve and they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so I ended up moving out the next year. We kind of dabbled with University of Montana and Missoula, and we're kind of splitting summers and winters and back and forth between here and there. And that was it, though, man. It was 91, crossed the Mississippi, and never really went back.
Right? It's one of those things where my story is like, oh, that was a good year. I'll go to school next year. And it was like, oh, that was a good one. We'll do one more good one. And then it was a bad one. And then it was like, well, you can't end on a bad year. You gotta do it right. And then you invest 6-7 years later, 20 years later, you're still there.
I was thinking about that squaw a number of years ago. That whole Tahoe, Cali region had those completely dry winters, almost like
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, almost the no winters, and it was at least 2, if not 3 years. And I was like, what happens? Because all of us like move out to like do the ski bum thing, to take a year off from college, to do whatever, and it just starts snowing, and you just start having these like life-changing experiences in the outdoors and nature, and you get sucked in, and you drop everything, you throw your college degree out the door, and you create this lifestyle. And I was like, I wonder, like, in that whole area, these people who went to do that, and they just skied strips of hard pack, like that, maybe they just went right back to it. They didn't get sucked in. There's like this weird little gap zone that occurred.
Yeah, that's funny you think about that too, because I always think about people like Wayne Gretzky. You think about people like Michael Jordan, or like the greats of those individual sports. And I always think about how many people born in like Australia or Africa or something would have been the greatest hockey player in the world had they had the opportunity to play hockey. Do you know what I mean? So that kind of thinking is the same thing. Is how many people missed out, or what did we miss out by having the bad winter and those people not being able to like contribute, right?
Yeah, it's crazy, but fortunately it kicked back up there, and
First White Claw, thank you for that. Cheers. So you came out like 91, and then so obviously people know that the Joneses have one of the most famous families in winter sports, right? Your little brother Jeremy, and now you got Kai upstairs too.
It's a multi-generational experience in business now, which is pretty cool,
right? Do you guys ever joke with Jeremy, or does he ever joke with you about how Kai took after him more than after you guys?
Jeremy will say that I'm the best athlete in the family. So, but I don't know. I think for whatever reason, I mean, we started TGR. I was young when we started TGR. It was like,
how did that start? I don't even know. I kind of know, but I want to hear you give me the whole story.
I'll do my best to. But we were ski bums. My brother Steve and I. Jeremy was racing, and we were getting published in Powder Magazine. We'd been in a Warren Miller film, and there was just a lot happening around Jackson. There was Micah Black and Rick Armstrong and the Jackson Hole Air Force and Doug Coombs. And so, we just kind of got in the mix of everything, and we were really motivated to ski and to pursue this lifestyle. And then the Alaska movement started going on, and Doug Coombs invited us up to be heli ski guides, and so we were heli ski guiding.
Did you have any certifications or anything, or was it still
cowboy
time?
How it started was before Coombs became Valdez Heli Ski Guides, people started paying him to show him around, and other people were like, hey, we want to be shown around, and he's like, those guys over there, they know the zones, and they know the terrain, and if you buy them, if you pay for their seat, they'll show you around.
Right.
So that's how we got into heli skiing. Or heli ski guiding. It was just a means to an end to ski, and so we were happy someone to pay the $60 for our seat and show them around. And
$60.
It was ridiculous. And
how long did you do that for?
We did that for a number of years, and what happened, and then Doug formally started Valdez Heli Ski Guides, and then now we were flying up in the spring to be heli ski guides for him, and there was no money in that, and so we would end up kind of dry docked at the end of the season, and one of my partners at the time, Dirk Collins, was like, you should check out the commercial fishing thing. So it's spring, and there's this whole summer Alaskan fishery, and we ended up so we're out of money up in Alaska.
What's the summer fisheries? Salmon?
We did black cod, halibut, herring, and all species of salmon. So we started. We would ski bum, and then we would go guide. We'd make no money doing that, and then we'd go commercial fishing, and we'd make a bunch of money. And we had, no one to answer to, nothing to do, and we were doing cycles of that. And during one of those cycles, we were like, we should buy a camera, and so we pulled in Dirk Collins, Corey Gavitt, myself, and my brother Steve. Pulled in a bunch of money and bought an old Ariflex 16 millimeter camera. Though.
Do you still have it?
They're all over our office if you see them, and in our stores. We ended up, back then it was a whole different world. So you shot on film, and the RES was the ultimate action sports camera. It was lightweight. The lenses they had were amazing, and they were super lightweight. And so we bought one, and we would take that up, and I'd ski a line and hand the camera to my brother, and he'd ski a line, and then we'd hand the camera to Dirk, and he'd ski a line, and it was just, but as TGR got more and more successful, we would just keep buying one new camera, and it was the exact, you just bought another of the exact same package. You bought
so
another
you each had
RS.
one, and you don't have to keep trading it off, kind of thing.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna go stand over here and shoot it from that side.
Before the digital era, we had, but you didn't have to think about it. You just bought another R. You bought the same lens kit. You got the batteries, and that was it. And then the whole DSLR revolution came around, and it was like, okay, shit is changing, and it. I think since then it's been a really, really interesting time to be. I feel like I've lived in probably one of the most rich times in film and media and content, because started in this old world of film, and it was just like, this is what you did. You bought these cameras, you filmed, you paid for the film, you edited it, and then all of a sudden the 5D comes out and it's attainable to everyone. And edit bays used to be $35,000, and film cost $100 to shoot 3 minutes of film, and we never liked video, but the Canon Cinema 5D movement started, and that was a really cinematic kind of experience, and that was when Red had started doing all this stuff with were starting to come out with the Red 1 and announce the Red Epic and the Red Scarlet, and we were like, the world is changing. And so
month to month,
yeah, and all these little cranes and cinesliders and things, and you just it went from never really reading a trade magazine to just being pinned online, going, what's new, what's next?
Because you got to keep up, right?
What's coming, and on top of that, the distribution model completely shifted, and YouTube came out, and all of a sudden, back in the old days, right? You made a film, and you put it literally to tape on a VHS tape, and the only way someone could consume it is either at like a little boutique premiere that you would put on, or they'd have to walk into more or less a specialty retail shop and get enticed to buy a ski or a bike or a surf film, and so it was there was a lot of people who were resistant to film going away and to the accessibility that you could edit a movie on a $2,000 laptop. You could buy a $1,500 Canon camera, and you could post your content on YouTube, and the world could see it, and and the DVD, the VHS went away, and then the DVD, and then that went away, and it became all digital, and like I remember, I think it was our movie Anomaly. We put it on iTunes for $1.99, and Mike Hatchett from Standard Films called me, and he's like, "What are you doing? Like, there's no money there." And I was like, because we were still selling DVDs. That was how we were making money.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mike, I was like, I've been embracing this whole movement and seeing where it's going, and really into the online and digital space. And I know there's no money, but I don't think I'm actually going to lose a DVD sale to these $1.99 downloads. Right. But I think that something is shifting, like in the world, and I think that we're all going to be there. And that's always been our philosophy at TGR, is to embrace change. And what happened is, all of a sudden now, those the $1.99 is now $15.99, and there's no physical print copies, or no shipping. And what we also started to find is that our audience broadened, because you didn't have to walk into a ski shop or a bike shop or a surf shop to buy one of these. People, you could give them a nugget of it sounds insane to even talk like this, but you'd give them a nugget of a clip pre-Instagram. You'd give them a short clip, you'd entice them in, they'd get psyched, they'd share it with their guy in New York would be like, "Have you seen this? You gotta download this movie." And all of a sudden we're doing selling more units, digital units, and the audience is broadening, and people are experiencing all these different sports that never did.
Mm-hmm. Who were you? Do you figure of the crew? Were you kind of the leader of that? Like, was there a certain moment where like we got to make sure we stay on top of this? Because I've been a victim of not acting early enough and like I holding on to stuff for too long. You know, like I would always go. Just out, a lot of it's out of like nostalgia and how you do things. When I was a kid, I would go to the CD store downtown Vancouver, go from the suburbs to downtown, and I'd buy usually 2 CDs. I'd go to A&B Sound. It would be like a day out. I'd have a couple ideas of what I wanted. I'd walk into the store and I'd forget everything I had listed. And I'd find a couple albums, have them in your hand, listen to them. And I remember reading an article once with like Rob Zombie, and he's like, "Throw your CDs away. They're garbage. They're going to be gone in a little while." And I thought about that a lot. I'm like, no, they're not going anywhere. This is how people listen to music now. And then probably, maybe a year or 2 later, I ended up buying a computer. Yeah. And I had the option of getting one with this disk drive and one without. Yeah. And I sat and thought of that for so long. And I went, all right, okay, I'm going no disk drive. This is the way things are going forward. And I was like, okay. And that was like the first moment I personally felt like, all right, I'm on the cutting edge. I'm on the front lines. But I think that what you just said was really cool because it is what I've noticed with TGR too. Like you've got obviously you have all your movies, but you're very savvy when it comes to being able to promote not only brand but your products that you put out, specifically with like the TGR website, which is massive. I don't know what your numbers are, but it's got to be one of the bigger adventure websites in the world, in my opinion. Sure. And I put a lot of the low pressure podcast stuff on there. Just people listening, go check it out. But stuff that fascinates me is as that evolution goes. Have you had any like big missteps or things that you wish you could have done better?
We've had a million missteps, but I will like from a very young age I was always into computers. It's what's interesting to me is because I predate cell phones. I predate. Like, computers were new. Like, personal computers were new when I was a really young kid. I got an IBM PC Junior and started writing basic code and was always really fascinated with technology. And then when we started TGR, we started TGR in 95 and the Continuum released in 96. And we, through a wild, set of circumstances, this guy, Chris Owens, built us a website. So we had a website in 1996.
Wow. It was like one of the first ones.
Yeah, and in 96, we were putting QuickTime videos online, and we were selling e-commerce. We had some TGR merchandise.
In 1996.
1996, before YouTube, before everything. It always fascinated me, and I think my partners and our minds that, like, technology. I was really blown away because when we were doing the early days of hustling at TGR, it was like trying, you'd pound the doors and hit the phones and you'd try and get on the network or get someone to buy your stuff. And as the web started to like grow and become something, I was like, so you're telling me anyone in the world can like turn their computer on and watch this and I don't have to bang the door down. And at the time it was hard to wrangle your audience, but the idea that exists today that like the world can consume your content and that you can be your own distribution arm it fascinated me. And I think that's that just parlayed into like the 5D movement, and all of a sudden it was like there was an old guard of us who owned all these Auraflex cameras and who had bought the $35,000 editing system and had figured out the model to spend $100 for every 3 minutes of film to be shot and processed, and I think a lot of that old guard was like really rattled when that started happening
because they have so much invested in it already, all this time and energy and all this equipment. It's like, well,
yeah, and that's when I met Nick Martini. We were doing a North Face thing, and he was what we considered to be a 5D ninja, like this new school of filmmaking who were using these very inexpensive digital cameras, and it was really the advent of digital cinema. And I was on the trip. He was talent, and I was directing, but we bought a 5D for it, and I was just the whole time just picking his brain and being like, he kind of became a second shooter, and it was that embracing that instead of resisting it and being like, oh, you guys have entered our old guard. And I think that was a similar time to when we decided that we'd always had the forums on the TetonGravity.com platform, and we featured our own content. And that was the time when we're like, you know what? There's a much bigger idea here. And the bigger idea is that TetonGravity.com and our business and our company is a destination for all things action sports. And instead of worrying about our competitors, let's welcome them in and let's work with them and let's become a hub for all things, for all content, for all news. And it was a very like seismic shift in thinking. And people are like, you're going to feature the Matchstick trailer on your site? And I'm like, yep. Watch.
Do you still do that?
Oh yeah, we feature everyone's content. I mean,
because I couldn't remember if you actually did the Matchstick
Yeah,
trailer.
we do anyone's, man. It's like my idea was that the outdoor action sports adventure space, is a much bigger concept if we're united and if we're sharing each other's things and working together instead of siloed out and working against each other.
I agree. And there's a handful, like I think the top dogs are kind of like Pink Bike for mountain biking. You got, in my opinion, TGR and New Schoolers for skiing, which serve two different markets.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if there's a surf one, to be honest, but there's those.
I mean, inertia.
The inertia,
they're
that's
doing
actually
cool
right.
Stuff, and they're kind of. They're similar to us. They're kind of across all spectrums. Started in surf, so they're
Joe Carver. You know Joe?
Yep. Oh yeah. He's a good man, and I like what they're doing. So I think when I was young and like ferocious and far, I wanted to just crush every competitor and smoke everyone, and as I got older, I was like, that's not a healthy way to live, and I came into this space of just a more inclusive vibe and being like, this is really cool. We're really lucky to do what we do. We're blessed, and I don't want to compete with anyone. I want to celebrate everyone's. Like, I know what it takes to create this stuff. I know what it takes to be an athlete and do this stuff, and I just felt like it would be and it has become, it's just such a more universal and like shared and fun experience to embrace it all together.
It's interesting you say that too, because like on the drive over here, so as everybody know, I don't write questions down. I do my research. Well, because I'd rather just get to know you and see where it goes.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Like, I'm not a fan of the rigid interview. It's not an interview, it's conversation, right? So on the drive, I always like to think about what I should ask about. So I was having lunch with Griff and Todd today, and I was like, what do I got to talk to Todd about? They're like, well, there's some things we probably shouldn't ask on the podcast, and then some that you should. But one of the things I thought about when I was coming over, you mentioned competition, right? And you've got like other ski films, so sort of thing. Like, so there was the Warren Miller, which kind of kicked it all off. And then for a long, long time, it was you guys, and it was MSP, and to a lesser extent, maybe Poor Boys, and then a little bit Level 1. And I always wondered if you guys have a good relationship with them, like a working relationship, or at least I've talked to several different magazine editors, and they're like, oh, they did this over at this magazine, or like, oh, they ran that story, I can't run this story. And then the same thing I was going to ask with you and then the Matchstick guys. Is there, like, obviously there's a mutual respect there because you've both earned your place and you've been there you've done great things for so long, but is there still that little bit of like underlying like competition, or like, ooh, they got us, or ooh, we're gonna get them, sort of thing?
Not really. We these days more and more we'll call each other about like someone inquiring about a business deal, or something, and say, hey, what, they're dropping your name, or you guys actually in, and so yeah, because that's another big thing that's evolved into this ski movie game, is a lot of the people that we've learned on here is to get a lot of athletes in these movies, a lot of the time is supported by their sponsors, right? Yeah, it's just sharing of information. There might be some new distributor that is coming around going, hey, I got this thing and I want you to be in, and Matchstick's in, and so we'll call each other and go, hey, are you actually in? Do you like what it is? And just make sure they're not bullshitting you. And but it wasn't always like that. I mean, there was a time early in my career when I woke up every day wondering what Matchstick was doing. And that wasn't healthy. That's what I said, when that sort of shift of like going, you know what, that's unhealthy. It's not cool. What they're doing is really fucking cool. And what we're doing is really cool. And what everyone's doing is really cool. And I don't know if it's age or wisdom, but I feel like I shifted into a more enlightened space with that. You know, like last night we watched as a family we watched Tales from Cascadia, and we celebrated.
What a
that
great movie! Hey?
It's incredible. You know, they beat us at IF3 for movie of the year, but I watched it and I had zero jealousy. I was proud of those guys. I was like, these guys are badass filmmakers. This is an amazing movie. This movie is like giving us like stoke and joy and getting us fired up and inspiring me as a filmmaker. And so, I don't know any more these days. I have my career. We have TGR's done very well, and I'm really happy to see all these other people doing it and to watch what they do, and it inspires me. I'm a fan. Like, I'm literally a fan of that film and all the people who made it and all the people that are in it, you know, and which is weird because I've done this for so long, you know. You'd think even our own athletes, oh God, there's Griffin Post, like he's a rock star. Like, it never gets old to me. It never gets numb to me.
That's amazing, and I'm gonna give Jeffy a call. I might show him this because I know Alexi and Jeffy have worked on that film for so like they've worked on that project for so many years, so hard, and they're so pumped. And I think to hear that coming from you, right, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome, and I love to hear that sort of thing too. Is when I started with the podcast, I was the first one, and then Powell started his, and I was like, ooh. But also because I was this independent guy, and all of a sudden it was done through Powder Magazine. I'm like, oh shit, like I'm screwed, man. I'm like, if they had called me, I would have been like, sure, just have it. But as it kind of developed, I had to actively force same sort of things. Like, I had to actively force myself to say, no, this is actually a good thing because this is still a fairly young medium, and his show is good, and my show is good, and people are going to listen to his. And they're going to find mine through his, and they're going to find his through mine, right?
I couldn't agree more.
So, like, you know, the high seas raise all ships sort of thing.
Amy does hers. And,
yeah, Amy. Yeah, I don't know if they're doing it anymore, but
I don't know. But for me, as a consumer, it's Powell, it's Amy, it's you. It's like the collective unit you guys represent in the snow world. And I'm sure there's a few others, but represent the medium. And for me, I'm not like it's not yours or Powell's,
right?
It's like it's the medium of podcasts, and it's like, oh, there's cool shit. This person interviewed did a podcast with this person, and
the variety is nice too. It'd be like, okay, this week, be like, oh, I'm not a big fan of this guest, but oh, this one's a good one.
Yeah, and I'm not like stuck in one or the other. To me, it's just the medium of podcasting, and I think what you guys are doing.
And that's the thing that really got me too, is because there's really no competition, right? We're not competing for consumer dollars. You know what I mean? Like, whereas I'm sure with back in the day when you're talking about Matchstick and stuff, you were competing for people to pay. Like, well, okay, I have enough money to go to one premiere this year, or I have enough money to buy one DVD. Which is it? This one or is it this one? Right?
But I think that was another revelation for me too. Was like, there's so many good athletes, and I'm like, we only have room for 18 or 20 in our film. Like, what about the other 67? You know, however many you see it now, and it's like, well, we can't do that also, and all these people deserve an outlet.
Right. And so, that was another question I had on the thinking on the drive over, is like, when it comes to getting athletes, and I do know, like I alluded to a minute ago, is sometimes it helps when they have the backing of a sponsor that's connected to the movie, or like, hey, we want to get this guy in, and obviously there's a lot of overhead costs, there's a lot of people involved, there's equipment, there's time, you got to pay for things, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes a lot of the times it's like, okay, well, we've got these three guys who are all on the same partner. They're going to give us a chunk of cash, and maybe that's how they go. But have there been moments in time, and I know that's not necessarily the only way that you get people on.
No.
So I think you kind of understand, excuse me, where I'm kind of going with this is like, it's fascinating to me to be like, how do we get this guy on? Do you still see people or young kids be like, I want that guy on my team? And is it sometimes, oh no, they went to the other team?
No, at one point many moons ago, we were TGR had taken off. It was like 7 or 8 years in, and we were filming. We had kind of our team, the Micah Blacks and Novus and that crew. But then we had these kind of in between guys that were doing other projects, and it was Tanner and CR and Yoon and Candide, and there was a lot of sponsor alliance there, and it seemed like those guys didn't totally want to film with us, but it was sort of part of that whole financing and sponsor matrix. And we had done we had just seen the moto guys had done these heli follows of these big jumps, and we had seen that, and I was like, I want to do that in snow, and so we lined it up to do it at Pyramid Gap with Tanner and Evan Raps, and I was in Alaska at the time, and Pete O'Brien, one of our Cinnies, was running the show, and I'm kind of calling in, going, we got a heli, we're building Pyramid, it's a big deal. And Tanner and Evan just weren't into it for whatever reason. And there was these kids, Sage Catabriga-Losa, Chris Collins, Matt Collins, Chris Manesi, and they were really fired up. There was TGR Film Crew, Helicopter, Pyramid Gap, and they just started throwing down. And I remember that sprint, so they ended up, being that segment basically. And I will say I love Tanner. Tanner's like, I admire him as much as any skier in the world. I'm a huge fan. But for whatever reason, our vibe didn't work out, and these other guys did, and they were unsponsored. They were dishwashers. They were working at Peruvian and up in Alta. And I said to my brother Steve, who was running the partnerships program at the time, I said, we got to get these guys who are fired up to film with us dialed into the space, because they're really good, albeit totally different than Tanner and Evan. Like you can't. I mean, they're
their own people, right? Their own things.
Well, Tanner's accolades are just, they run through the depth of the sport to this day on the Freeride World Tour. But we were like, we gotta, and we're like, that's gonna be interesting and difficult. But it was a shift of like having people tell other people, like, Tanner, you got to film with them because we sponsor them, and us kind of like, trying to push him to film with us was just the wrong thing, and then we had these guys who really wanted to, and so we shifted our focus at that point to a program where it is more like we really make sure that the people that we're filming want to be together. They want to be with us,
Mm-hmm. That's definitely something that you can see get coming through with like the TGR crew and like the teammates, right? Like the Collinses, McIntosh, the McNutts, the Catabriga-Losas.
It's a family.
It's a family.
But then at the moment that we're doing something to like almost force someone to do something with us that doesn't want to, like we're against them, So like Tanner started going off on his own and started making these incredible movies and projects, and same thing at the time. I was in Aspen. I mean, what was it? I can't remember the name of the movies. It was one of him and CP's first big movies, and I remember being at the meeting in Aspen and watching it, and he was there, and it was same thing. Though I was just like, wow, I'm so fucking proud of what you did. Like, and you created it, and it was a good moment in I think my life and probably his and theirs, like of just like go chase your own dreams, chase your own thing.
Let things fall where they're supposed to go.
Do it with the people you want to do it with.
Nothing works when it's forced.
Yeah, and so now the more, the longer we've done it, going on almost 28 years now, we're very aware of like, are we forcing something are we forcing a round peg into a square hole here? Or does this flow? Does this person want to be here? Are they our vibe? Are they going to get along with the other athletes? And so that's super important, because you're ultimately going out into the mountains, and risking your life, having some of your greatest experiences in the world. And you better make sure you're doing that with people that you're stoked to be with,
right.
and that it matters and it's meaningful. Because otherwise, like. I never viewed this as a job, this is like a privilege and an opportunity, and what we do is it's so blessed, and so I want to make sure that we're like sucking the marrow out of it, and that everyone's completely as fired up as I am.
That's cool. And you guys have the Grom Contest too, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which is another kind of funnel to where you guys want to, to find talent and things like that. I know Level 1's got their Super Unknown. I know Quicksilver's got their Young Guns competition. You guys got the what was it? What's it officially called? It's the TGR Grom.
It's the TGR Grom Contest, and we do a ski, snowboard, and bike.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always like as a guy, as a content creator and a media guy, I've always been But remember, there was a day when that platform didn't exist to showcase your stuff, and people always like, how do I get involved? How do I get and everyone thinks of like the big films as the only thing, but I'm like, there's a world where we're creating content for a brand that isn't part of the film where you can enter, and there's also this world where we have this platform and this website, and we can allow users to upload content and they can participate in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done photo contests, but the Grom Contest is always something that's been super important to me, because I've always wanted to just represent youth talent. I've just always wanted our platform, whether young or old, just to be a place where people can showcase what they do, and so the Grom Contest was just something to bring the youth in, to keep TGR young, and we had been running it for a while, and then my son Kai started doing IFSA Freeride comps, and I really became part of the youth movement at that point. I've been a coach now for 4 or 5 years.
Do they have like a Freeride program?
We have a
Jackson?
Freeride program. Yeah, I was on the board of it we had 120 kids. I was a board member for a while, and I've been a coach, not just of Kai, but of a bunch of kids, and really found love in the youth side of things, and saw all this just incredible young talent, and became part of this youthful movement. And so that got me even more jazzed on the Grom Comp, and I'm like, we got to keep feeding this. These kids are young, and they're hungry, and they're rad, and they want an outlet. And so the Grom Contest is something I hold very dear to my heart, and I'm very psyched on. And I think one of my greatest Grom Comp moments is Park and Costain dropping into Kings and Queens the year he won it, and the announcer's rattling off his stats, and one of them was whatever year TGR Grom Contest winner, and I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah,
that's
he
cool,
was
man. That matters. That means something. I'm like, wow,
that's
awesome. Really cool. To me, that was like an elevated moment for that thing, that it actually was something meaningful out there.
He actually had him on the show a couple days ago.
Sweet.
In Wiley's
Garage.
Probably
talked about it.
I think we did. I've done like 5 of these in the last day and a half. So I'm pretty sure did. But he's a good kid. So a lot, like you said, a lot of it has to, what you were talking about, the fit and the vibe, and like, do people like anybody, and like it comes down to character a lot of times too, right? And I'll tell you that kid's got tons of character.
He's amazing.
I just reached out to him.
He's a second generation ski bum. His dad.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. His dad and mom.
Ski bum and a trail builder, and started building mountain bike trails illegally, and all of a sudden the bike world shifted, and that became a business, But Parkin, very similar to me and Kai, like, is a kid who grew up with a ski bum dad who was like, hey, you want to come with me?
Right.
I'm going out. And as a parent, like, when you're changing diapers for 6 years, and then 7, 8 years old, like around 9, the kids start to get kind of good at biking or skiing or snowboarding, and you get to call it parenting, and you're like, hey, me and Kai, we're gonna go out and go tour all day on a Saturday, and
like, what are you doing? I got to hang out with my kid.
And it counts,
right.
as a husband, and that balance of family. I just saw this opportunity to get out there and have a ton of fun.
Yeah.
With my kid.
That's awesome.
And I think Parkin came from that same.
I think so
same
too.
Roots, where it was like his dad was just like, "Oh, cool, you're old enough to do this now," and you start. you start showing them the way, right? And
well, he was telling me a lot of what he showed was filmed by his dad.
Yeah,
like his dad put together like most of his clips and things.
And you're showing the young kid, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, they're faster than me. Oh, they're better than me. Oh, they're going bigger than me." You know, it's like it's funny watching those tables turn. You know, and I think the way I've always, not gotten ditched is my true craft in life. My camera has kept me connected to everything, and so I'm the camera guy. So I still they wait for me. You know,
right.
They could all ditch me, but they're like, "Oh, camera guy's coming."
Well, also
so I still get to hang.
You're also the guy who signs paychecks too, right?
But I get to hang because I'm the filmer, and a lot of times, like with Kai, it all started out. I was the iPhone filmer, but I was like pretty good iPhone filmer. I remember parents being like, "How does your shit look so good?" I'm like, "You just got to know where to go." You know,
25 years of doing this professionally. Thank you very much.
You shoot a lot of really good stuff with an iPhone.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. Low pressure podcast. But that's what I was going to ask you about Kai too. People have been like, "You get Kai on the show. You get Kai on the show," and I'm like, "No, not yet. I don't think I'm ready." Like, first of all, he's an amazing skier, and people want to learn about him. But at the same time, was it 15 now? 14, 15?
He just turned 15, yeah.
He's a 15-year-old kid, right? Like, yeah. I'm like, what am I going to talk to a 15-year-old for an hour about at the moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, let him be, right?
Yeah,
I'm like, he's a Red Bull athlete now. He's a Jones. And a lot of people, I'm sure, have been like, oh yeah, his dad's Todd Jones. No wonder he's blah blah blah. But he's gotten where he was on merit. Like, you don't get to be a Red Bull athlete if you're not good.
Yeah.
But I'm saying is one of the reasons where I'm like, I'm gonna give him a couple of years just to get some experience, get some development, that sort of thing. And that's why I wanted to talk to you first, is because we're gonna get that little insight from you on Kai, and I can learn a little bit about it as well. So basically what I'm trying to say, I think, was with with being Kai's dad, and obviously you're kind of shepherding him into these sort of things, and like I said, you don't get to be a Red Bull sponsored athlete if you're not good at something, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I was telling someone this other day, I don't think I have any interest in talking to a 15-year-old yet. I do, absolutely, because I would put him on the show and it would get a shit ton of numbers and people would be stoked on it, that sort of thing. But I've always been of the mind where I usually want to either meet someone first or have an opportunity to get to know them first. Like, our situation's a little different. When I'm in a place like Jackson, I just get shut down. But so moving on to that is some of the questions I wanted to ask you. Like with him is like, as a dad, you're on a lot of his shoots. I'm sure you're the principal cinematographer, or like the chaperone, I guess, so to speak.
A balance between, we did a thing a number of years ago with Atomic where I was, they were doing a thing with Nikki Kiefer and Ben Shetler, and Kai was the big bent, the 120 Ben Shetler, the 100 and the bent mini. And that was really fun for me because I was flown out just as dad. And we toured around, and Ben Shetler showed us around.
You didn't actually have to have a camera in your hand.
I did. I had it. I had a GoPro with a stick, so
you could ski without a pack, kind of thing.
Doing stuff, but yeah, I really was just there as his dad, which was super fun. But the vast majority of the time, yes, I am the chaperone, the director, the lead cine of what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Now, so I have a friend that his brother is really a big high music executive in like the hip hop R&B world. Yeah. And his son is coming up. He's making beats. He's writing music. He's got some really big, like big, like worldwide recognized names under his label that are kind of taking him under his wing. But at the same time, he's like, Dad, you know what you're talking about. That kid, you know what I mean? Like you're still his dad. Yeah. So do you ever get a little bit of the pushback, or like what's the relationship with that as well? Does he, because when you're in the mountains, I'm sure it's been put into his head that, hey, this is a separate thing this is its own thing. The mountains are a special place that you need to be safe and careful, which I'm sure has been ingrained into his head his whole life. But also when you're back there doing stuff and like dad's on the camera and he's trying to tell you to do something or trying to influence him or give him some information, are you guys able to turn it into a professional kind of relationship and not have that overlap of like, oh, Dad, man, like give me a break kind of thing?
No, it's. We've kind of been since he was about 10, sort of starting to do different, pretty wild adventures in the mountains. And there's the don't go in front of me, and he'd go in front of me and I'd yell at him, like, why? And a little 10-year-old kid, like, why are you yelling at me, Dad? I'm like, because this is a different situation right now. We're in avalanche terrain. I'm the lead guide right now. You don't go in front of me. You got to listen. And so I mean, it'd be interesting to hear his perspective on it. I'm sure he doesn't have it as clear as
maybe we'll wait till he's a 16-year-old
when he was that young. But it was there's been those moments where I have to go from being like Todd Jones, the director, the TGR cinematographer, the guy kind of running the shoot, to the dad moment, and like pull him aside and be like, hey, this is why you need to listen. You just have to respect. And we're super safety conscious at TGR and put a lot of time and effort into training and everything. So I think there was a time when his young mind was trying to wrap his head around that, and like, why when we ski around the mountain I can just go anywhere and do anything, and now all of a sudden we're here and there's really rigid rules, and there's really like the flow of movement and everything. It's not, you got to ski to here and stop there, and you got to do that. And so that's always been an interesting thing. I think he's old enough now that he
understands the dynamic a little better.
Yeah,
right?
And that's a big, like, now he's a full part of the TGR family and team, and that's how we all operate and function. And we have our 3-day training course coming up in early December.
Right.
This will be his 4th year doing that. So like the more, like, all that does is just beat home those rules of like travel and practice and mindset and decision making in the mountains. So I think he's
there's enough of that it's not just dad telling him anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But then I'm sure as soon as you get back in the car and you're on your way home, it's
the other shit.
It's back onto the bullshit.
The brothers fighting, that stuff where you're like, what are you doing? I get more respect out of him in the mountains. Than just at the.
You've been pissing me off, bud. Let's go skiing, right?
Let's go skiing so we can get back on the same page.
So on like another kind of angle of that sort of thing is now you are watching your son do some pretty gnarly shit, right? And you're sitting down there, and obviously you're always concerned for your athletes, but now there's that extra element, like, that's my kid, right? And there are moments where you're like, say McIntosh is lining, or McNutt is lining something up, right? And you're having that discussion with him, and he's comfortable. He's like, yeah, I think we got this. This is what I'm going to do and go. But maybe you're not 100% sure in your head, but you have the utmost confidence in Nick or whoever it may be to ski that line. You're like, okay, if you're 100, then I'm here. I'm going to put the camera on. Yeah. But now say it's Kai at the top of a run, right? And he's 16, still has a lot of experience. He's a good skier, but he's still got lots to go as he develops. Yeah. And you're down at the bottom in that exact same situation. It's no longer a McNutt or a Sage or a Mac. It's Kai. Like, how is that? Have you had moments like that where you've been like...
For sure. And honestly, I've been dealing with that my entire career, but because filming my brother Jeremy Jones and all the stuff he's done. I mean, I remember being in Tulsa, British Columbia, and we were long lining him in a helicopter into a notch that you couldn't land the heli on. It was way predated his foot-powered movement. And they're long lining him, and he's swinging around, kind of pushing off the rocks, and I'm on the long lens, the Barbie angle. And I just remember thinking, like, what would Mom think right now? She would fucking kill us. And so for me, filming Jeremy always has an elevated, like, it's weird, but it's your brother, know, and
which is a level, but then when it's your son, it's that.
Yeah, so then that same mindset translates. It is different. If Ian Mack is up there and he's like, I got this, I'm cool, like, you're like, okay, he's got a lot of experience. But I think Kai's been good to be patient and to listen. And like a funny story about that whole mindset this year is one of his big lines in his segment is him backflipping this Jackson Hole Classic, Smart Bastard. It's a solid 40+ foot hit, and he that was on his goals list. He has a goals list before the season. That was on his goals list all season, and we had an underlying avalanche problem. It's the double problem. It's like you have your surface problem and then you have your 5-foot problem. And when we have that, I generally don't really want to deal with it because that's that 5-foot dragon. You can't predict that. So he'd be like, "Oh, it's really good. So and so hit Smart Bastard." I'm like, no, it's not. It's not time. And he was very respectful of that. And then we had a big warming event in March, and that whole lower deep dragon buried mysterious layer went away, and all we were dealing with was the surface conditions. And we got about 16 inches of snow, and we went out and probed the landing, and it wasn't quite there. And we got another 6, and we probed again, and we're like, there. He's like, "Can I hit Smart Bastard?" I was like, "Yes, you can." Like we were confident in that it wasn't going to slide and push him over, but could have used another 6, 7, 8 inches of snow, but it wasn't coming in the forecast, and I was like, "I'm totally comfortable with you hitting that line right now," and he hit it and stomped it, but took a knee to the face. Had a bloody nose. He was a little dinged up, and as he says in the film, he's like, "Best day of my life." And he's got blood kind of pouring down, and it was one of those things where like I knew he had it. I knew he had it all along, but I as his dad and as like one of the lead safety guys at TGR, I was like, "We're not going there right now. It's a hanging snowfield above a cliff. There's been a death over there." But I was like, "Yeah, there's enough snow that nothing really bad's going to happen. He's going to land on his feet, and it might be a little whiplash to the face." Then I think that's something, I also I've been skiing with Kai his whole life, and watched his drive and the effort and the training he puts in. So I know. And really, honestly, I've never really had to yank him off something where I feel like he's been like too frothing without considering like, is it safe? Am I capable of doing it? So, but that's what I'm paying attention to. I'm paying attention to like, what's his mindset? Is he like in the flow state right now? And like, as long as he's in the flow state, I'm cool with it.
Because you spent 15 years paying attention to this kid, so you know if he's a little squirrely, or if you know he's locked in.
Locked in and ready to roll. And I mean, the Jackson Bluebird Big Cliff segment this year was insane.
Which they won the IF3 award
that was
for.
That was Cook City.
The Cook City one.
That was another
the backcountry, yeah.
The Jackson one was like we had that underlying problem all year, so we couldn't really and we had a lot of snow, and we couldn't really film those big cliffs, big high country lines, and we patiently waited, and then there was spring break, and it was like, I mean, I think between Kai and Mikey Marone and Tim Durtschi, we pulled, I mean, you know how hard it is to film this stuff. We were pulling like 8 A+ automatic like contenders for the film a day over a course of 5 days, and then it got warm. We had a 5-day window, and we just boom, 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 and smashed that whole thing together, and it was pretty wild. But you're like, Kai and Tim and Mikey were stomping everything, and like that's when you're locked in, and that's when you're just like,
let's go.
Yeah,
it's time to work.
That's the time to.
I was talking to Tim. So I follow the Freeride World Tour a lot. I do a lot of work with them.
Yeah.
And when Tim was on the tour, I was actually asking him about Kai, and like he seemed, like I said, he's basically like an older brother figure, right?
Oh yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome seeing those two guys together and having like Tim not necessarily be a mentor, but more of like a buddy who knows everything.
I'd say he's a mentor and a buddy.
Yeah.
And,
but I'm just thinking like it's not just like do what I do. It's more like, hey, let's have some fun, and we're gonna learn together, sort of thing.
Tim is like with all young kids and people. Tim is amazing and loves to share the sport.
He was like riding the chairlift, like just doing laps on like inspection days, a couple days before the event at Kicking Horse. And I was like, "Hey Tim, what's up?" And I ended up getting on the chair with him. And he's got a couple of the Freeride kids from Golden, and he's just skiing and hanging out with them for the day. The next day, same thing, different bunch of kids. He's just ripping around. They're showing him hits and stuff, and it's having the best time.
Sharing for Tim, I feel like he loves to share the sport and share the experiences. And it's funny too, because I ski with Tim a lot inbounds. And all these young kids are just like, I mean, it's every day is full send. Every day is the sickest day. Every run's the best run. It's really infectious. But like Tim will be very reserved in those days. He's just kind of like helping the kids get into things, and they're all sending 30-footers and going crazy.
Is he working as a coach, or is he just
no? He's
skiing?
Just that guy,
Yeah.
and loves it. I mean, it's like go ski around with a bunch of 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids who are having the best moment, the best day, the best, like, it's pretty inspiring. But Tim's not out there like trying to huck the 30-footer on hardpack. But the film days come around, and it's like he unleashes, and I've asked him about it. And he's like, I don't have anything to prove on those days, and my body can't handle it. I love watching these kids do it, but I got to save it for like
when you're in your 30s, you don't want
film
to
days, and when the conditions are pretty good, and then all of a sudden he turns on, and it's like, oh, okay, that's why you're Tim Durtschi.
Right. That's pretty awesome. So with do you get to ski much yourself these days? Like I was wondering, is how many trips do you actually get out on a year? Are you like in the office, stuck there? Are you skiing every day still? Are you like getting out? Are you still going on trips?
I spend more time in the field than the office. So
Are you still kind of like the same balance as you were before?
I mean, it's shifted over the years, right? Like when we started TGR, we did everything. We didn't even really have an office, right? Like it was, we had a fax machine we stole some milk crates and put a piece of plywood and plugged in a phone and a fax machine, and we're like, all right, what is that thing ever gonna ring? Like, what do we do? And it was one desk, and there was 4 partners, and we just looked at it, and we didn't know what desk work was. But as it's evolved, there was times and years when I was very little field time and a lot of just in the office business time.
You get to that point where, fuck, this has to get done. I have to make these, and you have to sacrifice.
Yeah, you do.
That stuff.
And I, now as we've like matured, I mean, we have a great team, and they do a lot of those things, and I'm a co-CEO with my brother, and we can run a lot of the world from our phone. And I think, to me, I started TGR as a filmmaker. We wanted a brand, but I've always been a filmmaker at my roots. And so for me, my continued passion is to create and direct and make content and films. And we're just wrapping up 4 films for HBO that we've done, that wrapping up these 4 films for HBO. And I co-directed with my brother, but was the field director for 3 of those.
What's the project?
It's called Edge of the Earth, and it's kind of like the world's greatest adventurers going to do the next big thing in different categories of sports. And
so that's another. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the other things I was thinking about too. Because I didn't know if you had done any podcasts before, but I heard you on, I guess, a radio show or something that they turned into podcasts about your movie with about Andy Irons,
yeah,
which is more of a documentary style.
My brother and I co-directed that as well. I mean, that being in the field and directing films is my true passion. I mean, that's what gets me stoked and out of bed every day.
When was the moment where you're like, man, maybe we should do something other than skiing? Because you doing mountain bike films now, you've got surf films now. You said you're doing that stuff for HBO.
Kayak. I mean, we've done. Right. I mean, when I was talking about that kind of, I think pretty early on. I mean, we made a surf film really early on in TGR. When we started TGR, we didn't want to be a ski video company. We wanted to create a brand that represented a lifestyle that represented outdoors and action sports, and it was in its infancy at the time. But we made probably our 4th year in, we made a surf film, and I think there's just always been this commitment to, and everyone thinks of our annual film, right? Like everyone listening to this podcast thinks of our annual snow film. That's a ski film with some snowboarding.
It's like the flagship product, right?
It is, but we've been making content across the spectrum for years now, like well over a decade of like pretty solid feet into covering all different sports and activities and things. So it was really out of the gate. While we were the first 4 or 5 years, it was the annual ski and snowboard film. There was always this drive to get into other sports.
It's like the demo reel, right? Like this is what
Yeah.
we love, but this is what's going to open it
Yeah.
up to everybody. So we can do that. Now, have you guys done, like, I know a lot of companies nowadays, they do the ski movie, and that's kind of they're in for big commercial work.
Well,
Now, is that something, like, I am not aware if you've done a lot of big commercial work or anything like that as well. Is that something that you've done? I can guarantee you've done, but is it something that is a part of the business model?
it's not totally part of the business model. I've done a bunch of it. There was a director, Josh Taft, who was a mentor of mine. He was probably at the time one of the biggest commercial directors in Hollywood, and he brought me in as his second unit director. He was an action sports guy. He was part of the Nissan Xterra movement, and so we did probably 12 Nissan Xterra commercials, like multi-million-dollar budgets, 80-person sets, and I would get my own unit, and we did Hewlett Packard, Gatorade. We did a ton of Energizer.
And is that through like the TGR, or is that just kind of you?
I was a representative of TGR being his second unit director, and I would bring my resources from TGR into his world. And then that led to, directing a number of my own commercials. But it's not, I really love it because what I learned a lot in that space was in 30 seconds, you have 8 shots to tell a story, and every frame has to count. So I've really tried to pass that along to younger people. I'm like, hey, look at your frame. Like, what if we did this? Or, it would tell a better story. And like, really don't take for granted any second of screen time that you get to put this shot on the screen.
Details count.
Make it count.
And then how did that translate into like the TGR stuff? Like
that's something that I learned where I've literally, like, so many younger people that I've coached and trained up. I'm like, let's make this frame count. Like, this is what it needs to look like. These shots need to look like. So really tried to pass that along. But it's not, for us at TGR, our greatest space is creating content for TGR, for the lifestyle, for the ethos and the brand. And but we learn a lot doing that. We learn a lot doing commercials. I've been able to tow athletes into some incredibly lucrative contracts where they've made 5-fold what we were making doing the project. And I think these days when we don't have an agent representing us for commercials because it's not something we seek, but occasionally we get sought after, and my evaluation of those is it cool? Do I like it? Do I like the idea? And then if it passes that test, the next question is, because you're going to triple bid it, you're going to bid it against 2 other people. Like, can I bring something to the table that they can't? And if I feel like I can, then I'm like, that might be a good job for me. And so yeah, I love the space. It's not something I seek, but I do enjoy it when the right thing aligns for me.
Right. And it's like, okay,
totally
this is actually
enjoy it.
going to be a fun project. And guess what? It's going to put
Well,
some
you
cash
learn
in
a
our
lot
pocket.
working in that. Like, you have to get all of this stuff done in these 3 days, and boom.
Do you enjoy working in those situations because they have like those immense resources versus like, we work TGR, I'm sure, I wouldn't say a shoestring, but you got to keep things tight.
Yeah, with those immense resources comes like equally immense pressure, and like you drop into one of those shoots and like you turn it on, like in pre-production and in the scout and in in the prep days and then the shoot days, and you are full throttle for however long it takes to, that those 5 or 6 days of the pre-production and the production and so yeah, I mean that's a huge adrenaline rush, and there's that machine doesn't work without a ton of people and a ton of moving parts and a great assistant director and a great producer, and so all these resources are just flying around at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and anything's possible, and it's a really fun space, but it's also really fun to go back to that quiet space where you grab a camera and throw it on your pack and you walk into the woods or mountains and it's just you and the people you're with. And
balance, man. It's the key to life. Is
really good balance.
Key to life is a good balance. So so basically what I've learned in this conversation is evolution. You're always looking to evolve, improve. You don't have any issues with let's try something new. Let's see what's out there.
We love new shit. We did the 3D project with Sammy Carlson. That was like 3D was blowing up and everyone was 3D's the future, and we said screw it, let's create a 3D shoot, and we went to Stevens Pass with Sammy and John Spriggs and did this really cool 3D shoot. Like we're like, let's just try it, let's get our feet wet. We didn't make any money. 3D never took off, but like we try, as I always say, it's Teton Gravity Research. Like we research, we try things, we test, we use the world as our laboratory, and so that vibe has always been super important, and I think is a really important part of the ethos of TGR.
Well, who came up with the name, and why? I want that story.
Yeah, it's a great story. Corey Gavitt, one of our founding partners, he had Micah Black, one of our also franchise athletes, was rolling around the ski trade shows trying to get sponsors with a resume, and on the cover it was Black Gravity Research. That was his personal thing, and when we started TGR, Corey was like, we need to do something like with the Tetons and local. We're beating the name around, and he was like, we Patagonia is a great name, and he's like, well, we're here, we're born in the Tetons, and so he grabbed the Teton and threw it in front of the Gravity Research, and everyone was like, that's cool.
Did Mike ever come after you and be like, hey guys, what are you doing?
No, Michael was in the mix on the whole thing, and he was, we were all in the same room all the time forever,
right?
So it was all a collective thing, while not a partner in TGR. Micah was a founding member of the company, and him and Rick Armstrong and some of these guys were doing incredible stuff, and no one was filming them, and that was part of the inspiration for us to buy cameras. We're like, it's all going down right here in Jackson Hole, and all we need to do is buy a camera and we can capture it and everyone can see what you guys are doing.
I love it, and I know that you've done 28 years. Is a lot of the ingredients for a recipe have to be right, and you got this family that your brother and like your brothers, right? You got a good crew, the right place, the right time. You got all these athletes, but also I've noticed you've got this passion for it. Like you still love it, and that fires me up. I smiled a couple times listening to you talk about stuff, just as I'm like, he's so stoked on this still, and that's one of the biggest components. So, is there anything that you're working on right now that's going to be coming up for release soon that people can look forward to, or if not, then just tell them about what they should watch now?
I mean, right now we have 2 films actively touring. Stoke the Fire, which is our annual kind of just like shred film. We have Mountain Revelations, which is a film I'm super proud of. It's Jeremy Jones, Ryan Hudson, and Rafa Pease, and it's kind of built on a series we've been doing with Jeremy, where you go into the mountains on a 2-3 week trip, and you address a topic and you have a conversation. And Mountain Revelations hits on inclusivity in the outdoors and origins of where people came from and how actually accessible the outdoors is, because you could argue like, oh, there's a national park right there and there's a trailhead and there's no racial barrier to go to that trailhead and park your car and to go into those mountains and do the things we do. But that's absolute bullshit. It's all the factors in life and society that came before that led to that moment at the trailhead are very big and meaningful and
very varied depending on who you are and how you grew up and where you're from. And
when we set out to make that film, it was all, BIPOC and BLM started to happen, and we came together as a group and said, what are we going to do with this? And originally we were going to release this big statement, and my brother and I shot that down, and we're like, let's not release a big statement. Let's actually like sit in the room and think about what we could do and think about using our medium to do things and
substance versus lip service.
And we said, well, we don't know. We don't have the answer. We're not going to make a film about the answer to all of this, but we could go and just start the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the film's really good and it's really powerful, and it's a little bit of a sandbag because people think they're going to watch a Jeremy Jones shred film, and all of a sudden they're like dealing with these big racial issues and big topics, and it was a scary film to make as like a privileged white guy who's had all the access to the outdoors, but it's helped open my mind to me when that whole thing went down. Right, like I left the East Coast. I said, "Fuck the establishment, screw the system. I don't like it." 30 years ago, and that this movement of like, okay, things need to change. I'm my mindset, my entire adult life has been in that space. So, all I could do was come at it compassionately and say, you know what, the outdoors is a very uninclusive place, and like, let's start taking steps to try and move towards that and to open it up. And so Mountain Rev is one of the most proud films that I've been part of and made that we've done. It's using our medium to do something good and not being afraid to go, fuck it, you know what, we gotta like, we're not the right people to necessarily talk about this, but if you want to address inclusivity in the outdoors, you got to start somewhere.
And you have the platform for it.
And for me, my acknowledgement was, no, we are not inclusive. And how are we going to get there? And so moves have to be made and things have to happen. So we have that. We have another really cool film about the indie resorts in pursuit of soul that's out. And so that's a great film. We're shooting another mountain bike film called Esperante, where I think Jeremy Grant is directing it, who directed Accomplice for us. We're in the middle of the third segment right now. That'll come out in the early summer next year. As I said, we have this HBO series.
Lots going on, man.
Film series that'll come out in late spring potentially, and developing a number of other films, and part of what we're doing also is trying to empower other directors and managing the business and the social media and the eyeballs and the metrics and the analytics and the deliverables for them, and helping them be able to do their craft, So.
I was in the office the other day and I was like, wow, it's big. Like I know Max who runs the website and I met a bunch of the staff and I'm like, there's a lot of people around here. I'll tell you one of the things that kind of boggled my mind is I was standing with Max and there's a table with like
all the drives,
piles of drives, piles and piles of drives, and I'm like, "Is this just some archive stuff?" He's like, "No, man, that's for this movie." He's like, and I was like, "What?" So then we walked into the other office, and I look, and there's another table with like a larger pile of drives, and he's like, "There's probably like what's a gigabyte? Not gigabytes. What's higher than gigabytes? Terabytes? What's the next one?"
Yeah, I don't even know.
He's like, "There's thousands of terabytes here," and then I was like, "Hey, who looks at all this stuff and he points over at the dude and I don't remember, I didn't get their names. The dude and the girl is like, they kind of do that.
Chris Almeida, Paul, I think he's Pollard's cousin.
Oh, yeah?
Is our post-production supervisor. So he has to deal with that whole mess of all the stuff coming in and
so much
and content.
Now, a question I have too. So like I control everything on my show. So I know what I've recorded. I know what I have, and I know what time, like I know I can cut the fat, right?
Yeah.
Before the fat is even, I can cut waste before waste even happens. But then now I produce another show, the Brett Tippie show, and he brings me his stuff, but I've been kind of coaching him like, this is this, so we don't have to do any of that extra stuff. Yeah. So when these guys are watching all this footage, and I'm sure there's just like hours of just garbage that they just can't, or just garbage or just wasted space or wasted recording or wasted time. Like, do they come to you, or do you have to like talk to someone like, hey, let's tighten it up? Because if you're going to film a bunch of junk that isn't necessarily going to be used, you're wasting time over here, which is essentially wasting money. But then there's the flip side of it being like, well, let's film everything and we're going to find some gold.
Yeah. I mean, it's a split balance. There's certain things where we're, as documentary filmmakers, right? You document and you capture, and your stories get chased. Mm-hmm. And so we have little things in place like the daily notes, the log notes, like what happened, like make sure you pay attention to this. And so, and someone's in charge of that shoot. So if it's like a shoot that I was on, that I directed, that I ran, that or a film, as a director, I'm generally aware of everything that was shot. And so I'm making sure that, And
are you making notes on each like track or each
daily notes? Each camera has notes.
And would you watch them at the end of the day just as a refresher?
We depends. A lot of times you're not afforded that luxury, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but if you are,
if you're out at TGR camp in the middle of nowhere, right?
And honestly, the one place where I'm almost more diligent that we watch the footage is when we're filming core action sports stuff with athletes, to review the footage to make sure that the cameramen see what they got, because it's so, to get an action sports shot, it's so, I mean, the craziest things have to align. The weather has to be right, the conditions have to be right, the talent has to be on, the camera has to be on. It's like the hardest, most unscripted thing in the world to happen. And so it's important to us that, we sit down and watch the footage as we're doing it, so athletes and cameramen and the whole team doesn't think they have something that they don't have. Yeah. Right? Like if it's a more controlled environment, you're kind of like
an interview or something like that, right?
Or an interview, or if you're doing like more commercial stuff or stuff that has a storyboard. Like you shoot the shot, you get it, you watch it, you go check, that's sweet, we got it.
Yeah.
With the action stuff, it's really important that everyone sees it. The athlete knows, no, I didn't, that cork 7.
Like where my arm was, god damn it, right?
It's not cool. No, I did not land that, because, I can't tell you how many athletes are like, yeah, I landed, was it good? And more and more, you try and be honest. You're like, I don't know, I think you could, come watch it. But yeah, so we review a lot of footage, and then I think in the post-production, it's notes. It's handing the editors notes. Like here's the daily note logs. Here's the overall arc that we saw. So like, yeah, day 3, there's stuff there, but it's probably not stuff that's going to feed into the storyline.
Yeah. All right. Last question. So a theme of this season so far, we've talked a lot about athlete edits. We talked to, since the first one with Jordy from the Blank movie, and then we talked I actually talked to Parkin about this the other day, is you guys put your athlete edits out. And I actually talked to Amy and Todd about it today as well. So I always love the idea of the athlete getting a hold of their footage and being able to curate some sort of a product with their vision of themselves. If it's, I know music rights are hard to get, but like put something together that's more in tune to their style of music, the way they see themselves, the way they think of themselves, and how that's related and portrayed through their skiing style. And I've always wanted them to be like, talk to the team, put it out as like a TGR or whatever program or whatever company you're working for. And I'd love to see that as an athlete edit, because you guys have a product, right? The movies are awesome, and you got your athlete segments, but I've always been really excited or curious to see, how does this skier see themselves, and how do they portray it, and then how can that be, and watch the different ones and say, okay, yeah, that's really indicative of how I see that person's personality, or I didn't expect that from them at all. Would you ever, like, I know you've done some athlete edits where they can come and do it, but is that something that maybe you would do in the future?
100%. Todd Laguerre is someone who's had over the years filming with him, had this, the Red Cross logo rescued from the floor, and it's him taking his footage from that didn't make the film and putting an edit together.
We talked about that this morning. Yeah,
that's a super cool expression of like this stuff. Why didn't it make the film? And the films are tough because you're making a film. It's like you might come out of one bump and sag, and you need to have a different rhythm and a different segment, and it might need to be about the complete thing. So I think that is important. I mean,
because there's a lot of amazing clips and amazing stuff that doesn't make the movie just because it doesn't fit. Yeah.
No,
it doesn't fit the mold.
But a lot of it's motivation. Like Laguerre's always been motivated to do it. Kai did one this year. He was super motivated. He got an editor and dropped in, and they spent a week dealing with it and creating an athlete edit that was his vibe. It was all killer, no filler. And but I love the athlete edits. I mean, we've Sammy and Torn and Jossie. We've been ones that aren't even related to us. Been trying to have them help them distribute those, because they're like, I can create the content. I am the talent. I am now a filmmaker, and I have this thing, but I don't have an outlet, a voice to be seen. So again, along the lines of that open book, we're bigger as a collective than our parts. We've been like, come in. We'll help you.
They're all gonna start calling you now, and you're like, fucking Mark, God damn it.
It's.
But I think that
it's
would be
really important to me and my brother and to TGR that we are. It's like back to Mountain Road. Like we have this voice. Like, how are you gonna use it?
Yeah,
you're gonna use it being a bad person, a negative person, or you're gonna use it for good things. And sometimes good things are just like pure Stoke and showcasing Torrance epic winner that he had and his vibe, and other times it's deeper and it's Rafa and Ryan and the whole inclusivity in the outdoors issue, and other times it's we did a film about cancer with two good friends of mine that passed, and we did the Andy Irons, which is not a film about a 3-time world champion surfer.
About addiction,
but it's a film about
mental health issues,
and addiction, and those things are meaningful, and so it's nice to use the platform. We want to use it for cause-based things. We want to use it for Stoke and positivity, and so much negative energy in the world. It's important to create some positivity and some brightness and light.
Well, that's probably the best place to leave this off, man. Thanks so much for having me at your house, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So everybody, if you don't know TGR, then maybe you just found this randomly in some website. As you may know, the LPP, I put it up on the TGR site. Max and the crew there are always good with showing me some love. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you, man. Thanks for having me at your home.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Low Pressure Podcast, the podcast for skiers. This has been a Redmark Media production.